4, 3, 2, 1, and... So as you were talking at your table, what were some of the themes that people noticed, or what was coming up for folks as they were watching that presentation?
It gets better.
That it gets better. What is the it? What's that?
It will get better. Things will get better.
Things will get better. All right.
Stand up.
Stand up. All right. Were some of the themes. What else?
Unity.
Unity.
Speak up for what you believe.
Speak up for what you believe in. Yes, I'm sorry.
That our leaders may not get there with us,
Our leaders may not get there with us.
and that pointing out different scenes over different time where people stood up and did the right thing to try and make a socioeconomic political point in support of themselves or each other.
Yeah. In retrospect, we say that King was a hero, that he was a champion. In his context, what was he? He was a rebel rouser, a troublemaker, a disturber of the peace. But now, he's the Lamb of justice. Right? So here's the interesting thing. So and it's funny, so Josh Murphy was in the previous session, and I got nervous because, he's like way up there, right? So he asked me this question. He said, you've only been at Mayo for a certain amount of time. What have you learned? And so I was like, I got to come up with something profound. But I already had something profound because it's honest and it's true, right? So I've been here, I don't know, almost 9 months or so. And one thing that I have picked up on is that people love Mayo. Love it. On your turkey sandwiches, no, just right? No, we love Mayo Clinic. And it reminded me of my grandmother's house. So my grandmother she was the kind of person, it was actually my grandfather. He had plastic covers on all of the furniture. Right? Particularly in the parlor. So that was like the living room, and that was the sitting room. That was for guests and special occasions. And the table, there was always these crusty lemon drop candies in this crystal shell, but they had sat there for so long for special guests, they had become one giant candy, right? And then it perpetuated itself, so nobody ever ate this candy, but it just sat in this crystal jar, and the plastic furniture was on there forever. And you know why the plastic furniture was on there, right? It was pretty obvious. It was to do what? To protect the furniture. Now so my time at Mayo is really interesting because I see people operating with plastic on the furniture. And I don't know about you, but my family didn't have central air. They had window units. So in the summertime, it was awfully uncomfortable to sit on that plastic furniture. It would stick to your legs, or you try to move, and it would move with you. It did no give. It was painful in some aspects, right? And so when I was addressing Josh, I said, well, that's what I've learned about Mayo. And all too often, what I found is that people will endure things that aren't working or aren't effective so that we protect the couch. And he said, well, so so what do we do with that? I said, there's also something that I also learned at Mayo in my short time here, and it's something called the dissenting voice. And so we have to create more spaces for those dissenting voices so that we can actually see things. Dr. King, his life was a dissenting voice. His life was a dissenting voice. And there were others that came before him that paved the way, so he didn't just do this on his own. But now we look back at him and say, what a hero! But that's not what they called him in his context. Right? And so we have to recognize that this dissenting voice. And I had some other names up there, like, have you seen this in history? Have we seen versions of the king's story of being this dissenting voice in the face of opposition in other aspects, in other ways, throughout human history? Do you have some examples? So Jesus Christ is an example of that. Mahatma Gandhi is an example of that. He was assassinated. The people he was trying to save were assassinated him, right? Lincoln was assassinated by the people who, he was assassinated after he did such a so-called wonderful thing, right? And so there's a price to be paid for those of us who want to look at our biases, who want to examine who we are and offer to the world a different way of being. There's a price to be paid. And so we have to ask ourselves, are we willing or to what extent are we willing to pay those prices, right? So let's move on. If you go to page 2, there are some truths about human beings that I want us to kind of talk about and get into, because these are some of the motivators as to A, why we have blind spots, and then B, why we must challenge those blind spots or those unconscious bias. One is that human beings can learn, change, and grow. Who I am today is not who I was at 17. Thank God. Like, I really was not this wonderful at 17, right? But people can learn, change, and grow. And we have to hold that out for people, even in the absence of evidence. Right? So when we plant a seed in the ground, we don't have evidence until it comes up that it's actually working. But we know that the process, all things considered, works. So people can learn, change, and grow. People also do what they think works, even when what? Even when it's not working, when it's not effective. So why would someone do something that's not effective? Why would they do that in the first place? Because it's all the way it's always been done. It's what they want to do. What's that? They're not conscious of what they're doing. It's easier. They're afraid. Do you know, I love it when con men and con women, people who run cons, I love it when they get caught. Do you know why they get caught? Arrogance. Arrogance. That's what catches them, arrogance. They keep doing the same thing, and don't realize what? Something's changed. And that's how they get caught. And so when we think about this people do what they think works. They do it because it's been effective. But is it possible that behaviors that we had when we were 13 may not necessarily benefit us when we're 32? Throwing tantrums. It's called something different when you're 32 than when you're 13, right? Yeah. So people do what they think works because it's worked in the past, right? We build on those things. And then secondly, all human behavior is goal-directed, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But we do things because that we have a goal in mind. And whether we're articulate enough to know what that is or say what that is or not is besides the point. But we're all striving for something. And we'll talk about what that is in just a second. And then attitude is a reaction to goal accomplishments. Attitude is a reaction to goal accomplishments. So, anyone have a teenager in your life? Anyone remember being a teenager in your life? Okay, cool. So, when has a scenario given different context gone down kind of like this? So, a parent is doing their parent thing, and a teen runs into the room. Mom, Dad, Cindy's having a party. It starts in 5 minutes. Can you drop me off? What does a reasonable, rational adult say to a request like that? Male, what's wrong with you? Lack of planning. No, nobody does that. You don't just spring up a party at the last minute like that. Hey, wait a minute. You knew about this party before. Why didn't you clean up your room? You and your siblings have not been getting along. You got a C in gym class. Who gets a C in gym class? And what happens after the parent is loading all this stuff on the kid? What does the kid do? Transformers. I hate you. Right? So they go off to the room with bad attitude. And they close the door like they own the joint. Right? But then the parent cools off and is like, you know what? Cindy needs my kid. She's working with this acne thing. Let me let her go. So I tell the kid, get your stuff. We can go. I'm going to drop you off at this point and pick you up at this point. Can't stay for the whole thing, but let's go. And what happens to the kid's attitude? It gets better, right? It may not be as pristine as it was before, but it certainly gets better. So what is it that is an indication? What is it that defines whether someone has a good or bad attitude? Their reactions? I would suggest that it's goal accomplishment. When you accomplish your goal, you have a good attitude. When you're not accomplishing your goal, you have a bad attitude. So how does that apply to us? What does that mean for us? So when I see someone who is disgruntled, when I see someone who has a bad attitude, what do I already know about them before they articulate their concern? I can recognize that they are not getting what they want. They're not getting their goal met. So then I can do one of two things with that. I can help them reach their goal, which is an easy thing. And they'll have what kind of attitude as a result? A positive attitude, right? Or I can help them find a new goal. We're not going to be able to do this, but we can do this, right? Or you think about how we can do that. And so what are the goals of human behaviors? We're all looking for significance, we're looking for belonging, and we're looking for safety, right? So Abraham Maslow has the 5 or 7, depending on what pyramid you want to use or hierarchy you want to use. I believe you can distill them down to 3. And significance basically says that I'm a person with purpose and power. I was born for a reason and I can do something. I have significance. Second is belonging, that I want to be in relationships with people who understand my significance. I want to be in relationships with people who understand my significance. And lastly, I want to be physically, emotionally, spiritually safe to be in relationships with people who understand my significance. When I taught middle school, I used this example, right? So why do kids join gangs? I'd imagine it's a combination of those or one of those 3 things, right? Why do kids join 4-H? Same reason. So what's the problem, if you will, with kids who join gangs? Is it what they're after? Is the goal wrong? I would say the goal is not wrong. I would suggest that it's the methods. And if I understand what people are after, we can negotiate what those methods are. We can negotiate how we get better influences or what kinds of influences impact folks. But if I'm not aware of my own biases and my own presuppositions as I enter situations, then I won't be able to be a critical thinker when it comes time to dispelling those things and understanding what I want versus what other people want. We're in a very polarized political season right now, but I don't think enough people recognize that this is what we're all after. And if that's what we're all after, let's talk about our methods. But people don't want to talk about the methods. They'd rather be polarized than actually talk about what it is that we're going after together, right? So that is that. So context is everything. Context is everything. So what is this big creature behind me? Tyrannosaurus Rex. And do we have Tyrannosaurus rexes around right now? I would say in large part probably not, right? And why is that? So some folks say it was a meteor that did that. What's as a result of that meteor or whatever that cause was? What was the result of that? Yeah, extinction, because they could not adapt to the context, right? So context is everything. And I would submit to you, if you understand context, then people's behaviors, their actions, their motives become much more clear as to where they're going or what they need, right? And so even our implicit bias, it comes out of a response to context. So let's go to page 3 in your handout. And what I'd like for you to do is I want you to create your family tree going back 3 generations. And so this is a family that you either were born into, you were grafted into, maybe adopted into, or a family you selected, right? So I want you to go back 3 generations and create your family tree. If you know people's names, go for it. If you just know their position in the family, that's fine too, all right? So go back 3 generations. Wherever you are, what I'd like for you to do is to put a star next to anyone that you've gotten to in your family that your family talks about a lot. They get talked about a lot. Whether it was something positive or something negative. But this person gets talked about a lot for something they did or how they were. Whether you've gotten to them in your tree or not. So put a star next to all those individuals that are talked about a lot in your family. So now that you have a star, I want you to pick one of those individuals and circle them. So put a circle next to, around one of those individuals. Whether it's an adoption or birth family All right, so next to the person that you just circled, what I'd like for you to do is to put words that are used to describe that person. What words are used to describe that person? Gentle, kind, courageous, a scoundrel, a thief, liar, whatever words are used to describe those individuals. All right, so now that you have some words that describe that person, what I'd like for you to do is to tell me what was when those words would be applied to them, what generation or at what age would those words have applied to them? So when would those words be added to them? So was it early in their childhood? Was it in their early adulthood, mid-adulthood, late adulthood? Were they 25, 45, 75? Was it 1950, 1930s, 1980s? Give a time frame around that person. All right, and the last thing I'll ask you to do with this is to kind of tell me, where were they when these words would have been applied to them? Were they in the United States? Were they outside of the United States? Were they in an urban area? Were they in a rural area? Were they on a farm? Were they in war? Where were they when these words would be applied to them? Where were they? Context is everything. So what I'd like for you to do is to